You're listening to the Greek's Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Hristodoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greek's Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and today, with free agency closing in on just about a week away from now, we will be watching players move around the league as teams put in their offers, be it to the highest bidder, the best fit, or however these players and their agents see fit. We're going to see some movement going on, and it's going to be happening very, very soon. So today, I am diving into what I consider best fits for a handful of free agents that I've selected from the pool. All these guys are big ticket notable players here. So I invite you all to comment down below. Share some of your fits. Any guys that you see sitting out on the free agent market, where do you think they should go, or where do you think they will end up and or fit best in? Let me know in that comment section down below. And of course, feel free to chime in on what I have to say here as well. I got 6 guys that I'm going to discuss. And the first person that I have on the list here is going to be the big one, quarterback Kirk Cousins. A lot of conversation right now going on as to where he ends up, if it's going to be still in Minnesota, or if he's going to go to Atlanta or somewhere else. The rumor mill is starting to spin, and I'm going to go ahead and go all in on the Atlanta Falcons being the team that Kirk Cousins winds up playing at next season. Now, I could be right on this one. I could be wrong. I am well aware of that. However, when I look at the Atlanta Falcons and the way they are currently positioned right now, new head coach, but a lot of talent, a really good defense that is maybe like a piece or two away from being a great defense, and they are good quarterback play away from being a legitimate contender in the NFC South, whether or not they even add to the defense, in my opinion. You look at the skill talent that they have here, and I talked about this during my free agency discussion regarding the Atlanta Falcons. You've got wide receiver Drake London, you've got tight end Kyle Pitts, you have running back Bijan Robinson. There's so much talent for Kirk Cousins to work with as threats at the wideout position, the tight end position, a running back that can also catch out of the backfield and open things up for the passing game through play action. This offense needs a QB, and the sky is the limit. And I personally think Kirk Cousins, ACL injury aside, has a good opportunity to come back and turn this team around here. There is some concern with the offensive line. It can be a little bit leaky at times. They allowed 40 sacks this past season, which is tied for 12th in the NFL, so not terrible. However, you could point out to the fact that ATL also took the 8th fewest pass attempts last season, so that number is skewed a little bit, being, honestly, if maybe they dropped back a handful more times, that number probably goes up. However, I do think that's fine. Atlanta is designed right now to be a far more balanced attack where you kind of drive things through the running game and open up your passing game. And if you take someone like Kirk Cousins, who, when you look at the Vikings, when they had Dalvin Cook there, same type of idea, very balanced attack. Yes, they were pass first, but you could trust that they could run the football if necessary. I think if you take a little bit of the weight off of Kirk Cousins' shoulders here with what they like to do running wise, or just what they're able to do running wise, I should say, new regime change, obviously offense could look different, but you still have a lot of the pieces intact offensively. I think you can run a heavy offense that focuses on the ground game, but allows Kirk Cousins to wheel and deal the way he does. He is not the problem and has not been the problem in Minnesota. For anyone who hears Kirk Cousins and brushes the idea aside because of the narrative that he's not where he needs to be, whatever it may be, I promise you, Kirk Cousins is a guy that the Falcons can build around. The interest is clearly there. His wife is from not too far outside of Atlanta. Her family still lives out there as well, and there's very clear interest between both Kirk Cousins, his wife, happy life, and the Atlanta Falcons themselves making something like this happen. And the reason I stand by that is because if that wasn't the case, Kirk Cousins maybe would have already signed something with Minnesota and we'd be on to the next conversation. But I do have a really good feeling that we could see Kirk Cousins in Atlanta. So this is one of those hills that I'm willing to die on. I might end up being wrong, and so be it, but it just all makes a lot of sense, Kurt, with the current state of the Atlanta Falcons and just how much talent is currently there. You get a good quarterback under center there. Yes, the Justin Fields idea is a very exciting one. However, the way I see it, Kirk Cousins guarantees you to be a contender. Justin Fields is a flyer. Yes, the future could be very bright, but it is a gamble. High risk, high reward. What do you want to go with? What is your personal preference here? For me, I think there's not too many opportunities where you build a roster that on paper looks as good as the Falcons does, where you can look at it and go, man, if we just had a quarterback, this team would be legit, especially with how weak the NFC South has been in recent memory. Go get the quarterback who's been playing extremely well the last 5, 6, 7 years, and go make yourself a contender. The next player that I'm going to be talking about here is going to be on the defensive side of the ball, and that's going to be linebacker Patrick Queen, and I have him pinned for the Seattle Seahawks. And with Pete Carroll no longer being the head coach and former Ravens defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald now heading the way over there in Seattle, this one just kind of feels a little bit like a no-brainer here. The Ravens just placed the franchise tag on Justin Madubuike just literally like a day or two ago now, and the way I see it, this leads to Patrick Queen being more than likely hitting the free agent market in just about a week or so. With that in mind, both Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks over there in Seattle are currently set to hit the free agent market. With a regime change going on over there, there is a good possibility that either one or both of those guys are allowed to walk. And with Macdonald clearly finding success, especially this past season where Patrick Queen really had his breakout year, I think there is a really real scenario where we see either both of those or at least Bobby Wagner be allowed to walk. Maybe they try to retain Jordan Brooks and pair him with Patrick Queen. I think that would be a very exciting duo at linebacker there in Seattle. But in my opinion, with Patrick Queen clearly being a big fan of Macdonald with all the praise that he heaped on him while he was going through his head coaching search just a few months ago. He talked about how much he cares and his unwillingness to basically stop until he had every minor detail ironed out with how he wanted his defensive game plan to look going into that week. This just makes a lot of sense to me. Patrick Queen boasts the ability as a do-it-all linebacker. He can stuff the run. He can drop back in coverage. He can chase after the quarterback. He can create turnovers. He really embodies what a modern-day NFL linebacker, and especially an off-ball linebacker at that, is supposed to be able to do. You look at his career numbers, 450 tackles, 37 of those being for a loss. He has 13 and a half sacks, 4 interceptions, 5 forced fumbles, and last year being, I guess you could call his breakout season where he really arrived and became the linebacker that his talent was showing that he would be when the Ravens went and drafted him 4 years ago. This one makes a ton of sense, and I just look at the situation with Baltimore right now. There's a good possibility that they're moving on from Odell Beckham, which means they're going to need to target maybe a new number one wide receiver just because of the way production and contract is probably going to work out with Odell. On top of that, you got to find a way to pay Justin Madubuike. I just don't really know how you can throw in Patrick Queen on top of that as well. And it's clear with the franchise tag going to Madubuike, he is the guy that they really want to make sure they retain. And the unfortunate side of free agency is usually someone winds up being the odd man out. And it feels like in this scenario here, it might be Patrick Queen. And I just feel like with the love he clearly shares from Mike Macdonald, with the talent that he has, I'm sure Macdonald, if he has the opportunity to, would love to bring Patrick Queen with him, solidify that linebacking spot for the next 4 or 5 years, the nice long deal, maybe potentially make Patrick Queen the highest paid linebacker, or at least among the highest paid linebackers in the NFL. It all just makes a lot of sense to me. So I like Patrick Queen going to Seattle. Third player that I have on my list here, we're going to go back to the offensive side of things, and I'm looking at the running back position, and specifically because he's not being franchise tagged by the New York Giants, and that is going to be Saquon Barkley, and I have him pinned for the Houston Texans. Now, listen to this here as to my reasons for why. First of all, Texans, they've got the money to blow. And in my opinion, if they add a legit running back, and hopefully their offensive line woes were really just a matter of maybe some of the injuries they dealt with, maybe they add a piece to the offensive line this offseason. But if you add Saquon Barkley to this offense, because yes, Devin Singletary was a fun little story for the season, a reemergence of a guy, who was drafted to do really well and ultimately has just kind of found himself not quite where you would have anticipated him being. And then, of course, Dameon Pierce having himself a sophomore slump. bringing in Saquon Barkley expands what this offense can do, because he's a guy that even when things aren't necessarily going his way around him, or maybe the offensive line isn't quite where it needs to be to open up the running lanes, he can make things happen, not only as a runner, but also as a receiver as well. When you look at his near 300 total career receptions, 2,100 yards to the air, and 12 receiving touchdowns, he could help take this Houston Texans offense to that next level here. And honestly, I don't think it's going to cost a lot of money. The running back market is enormous this coming free agency. There's going to be so many big names available that it's going to water down the market. And when there's a surplus of anything, the price typically drops. And we've already been seeing the price go down for running backs as is. Players are having a hard time getting the money that they want because people kind of feel like running backs are a dime a dozen. I understand that conversation. That being said, though, when I look at Saquon Barkley, I still look at him as a guy that is more than just a dime a dozen running back. I don't think there are a lot of Saquon Barkleys running around the NFL right now. Yes, I understand injuries are a concern, and that is something you of course have to consider with whatever the deal is that you're going to be giving him. Maybe it's a 1-year prove-it deal, maybe it's like a 2-year deal just to have him locked up in the event that he's healthy and your offense really does open up in that first year, so you're able to hammer out maybe another 2 or 3 year extension down the road if need be. But when I look at the amount of talent that you have currently in Houston right now, of course, Dalton Schultz just recently re-signing with the team. He's going to be around for the foreseeable future. I think it was a phenomenal signing. It was one that I picked out a while back as well. You have the emergence of Tank Dell, who went down with a really unfortunate injury. Nico Collins, of course, he was another story for the Texans. And then CJ Stroud, who came in and lit the NFL on fire this past season. The running lanes and opportunity for Saquon Barkley should be wide open in Houston here. I will never sit here and say that Saquon Barkley was any part of the struggles that was going on in New York. If anything, the struggles in New York hindered what Saquon Barkley should have been able to do over the last handful of seasons while he's been in there. With the lack of talent and just the current situation that's going on over there, I blame not Saquon Barkley for maybe his production levels not being quite where they should be, but more so the New York Giants. When you are the lone threat and the only real piece that a defense needs to look at week in and week out going into facing the New York Giants, and they go, if we can stop Saquon Barkley, we can probably stop the New York Giants offense, it's going to make things tough for you. And with so many threats in Houston, Saquon Barkley will just allow things to open up through the passing game, and with that passing game being clearly as effective as it was last year without a real rushing attack, you have someone like Saquon Barkley who can take advantage of those running lanes that start to open up. He's a guy that if the Texans aren't looking at, it's one of those other top-end running backs. But when I look at the running back market here, the guy that I do like the most out of everyone in terms of age, production, what he brings to the team, Saquon Barkley is the guy that I would be scooping up if I was the Houston Texans. Fourth player that we're going to be discussing here. We'll go back to the defensive side of the football. I'm looking at an edge rusher here, specifically Danielle Hunter, and I have him pinned for the Washington Commanders in kind of a no-brainer type of situation here. The one big thing that I think has been a bit of an issue between Danielle Hunter and the Minnesota Vikings has been money, and the Vikings' somewhat inability to be able to pay him. And it kind of feels like that might be the situation we're heading into again. And this time around, with him not being franchise tagged, there is a good opportunity that Danielle Hunter is taking his snaps elsewhere. And it could potentially be in Washington, where they have $96 million in cap space to work with here. And they've got a new owner who I'm sure is looking to spend and bring in some premier guys, big name players, to make his team that marketable franchise that it should be, being in Washington, D.C. Now, when you look at what happened with the Commanders this past season during the trade deadline, went on a fire sale, they got rid of both of their edge rushers there, basically resetting both ends of the defensive line here. With a serious need to upgrade, it will not surprise me if we see the Commanders dip into free agency, get themselves a veteran proven guy that they can go after, and on top of that, draft maybe a potential premier edge rusher as well. We don't necessarily know what they're going to do with the number 2 pick in the draft. They could go quarterback like some people are projecting. Maybe they go elsewhere. Maybe they opt to trade back. Who knows exactly what's going to happen here? But if I had to guess, the Commanders are drafting one of their edge rushers and they're signing one of their edge rushers. And I think that there is no better option in terms of a signing and a guy that your rookie could lean on better than someone like Danielle Hunter, who has proven year in and year out that he can do it with the best of them, be one of the most productive pass rushers in the NFL, not lead the league, but have, a career season when it matters most. 16 and a half sacks this past season. 41 pressures, 23 tackles for loss, in a career where he's nearing 100 total sacks already, over 100 tackles for loss. He's pushing towards 200 total pressures in just the last 5 seasons alone. Yes, the AAV is projected to be very high. Spotrac has him listed at about $20 million per year or so, give or take. In my opinion, it's probably going to be higher than that just because of the jump in salary cap number and just the price that premier edge rushers are going for right now. But it makes a ton of sense that the team with the most money is able to go after a premier position like a pass rusher in Danielle Hunter, be able to give him the most money and bring him in and allow him to set the edge across from a rookie that I'm kind of expecting this team to go after in the draft. So I expect Danielle Hunter in Washington. I'd be curious to hear what you have to say there. The 5th player that I'm looking at, we'll go back to the offensive side of the ball, and this one is going to be a wide receiver, and I'm looking at Calvin Ridley. And I have him pinned for the Baltimore Ravens. And I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier here when I was discussing Patrick Queen with Odell Beckham's contract situation. The guy made $15 million last season, but I don't think his production warranted that $15 million. That is something that I know the Ravens are going to be sitting down and are considering right now as they maybe try to work something out with Odell Beckham before free agency starts. But I'm just not quite sure, based off the price tag that I'm assuming Odell is going to have set for himself, combined with what they got production-wise last season, that a deal is going to get done. This is where you go and bring in wide receiver Calvin Ridley. 76 catches, 1,016 yards. He had 8 passing touchdowns, 8 receiving touchdowns, and he was averaging a whopping near 13.5 yards per reception. This makes a lot of sense. Zay Flowers, first-round pick last year, rookie phenom, exploded onto the scene. However, mental errors, youth, and inexperience did kind of rear their ugly head, so I don't quite know if I'm ready to call Zay Flowers wide receiver 1 for the Baltimore Ravens. You also have someone like Rashad Bateman, who, another big-name wide receiver for the team, drafted as a wide receiver 1 in the first round himself a few years back. He arguably had his best season during his rookie year, and since then has been, in my opinion, like a legitimate number 2 wide receiver for you. You don't quite have that true number 1 guy, at least at this very moment here. And for the Ravens right now, you are in win now mode. You need to be willing to go all in and make a splashy move to try and see if you can get things to work. And when you look at a guy like Calvin Ridley, who brings experience, proven production, and is arguably one of the most beautiful route runners in the NFL, and I will stand by that, probably the best route runner in the NFL with the way he moves, this is the exact type of guy that you should want your 2-time MVP quarterback Lamar Jackson to be throwing the football to. I do truly believe that the Ravens are like a legit wide receiver away from being a consistently week in and week out dominating offense. Odell Beckham was supposed to be that guy, but unfortunately, I do think that the injuries to his knees are kind of starting to catch up with him. I could be wrong on that. Maybe he goes somewhere else this year and blows the doors off of, defenses. I could be wrong, but that's just kind of how I see the situation right now. I would love to see Baltimore go after, again, just go back into the well, see if you can get a guy. You clearly have 2 really good young wide receivers, but go get that guy that solidifies the room. That's a proven number 1, a guy like Calvin Ridley that you know is going to be able to create separation, score touchdowns. He's going to hit that 1,000-yard mark. He's the type of guy that you want to kind of finish off your wide receiver room with a couple of younger guys working alongside him. And then the final guy that I have here that I'm going to discuss, this one just announced yesterday. He's going to be hitting free agency. That's going to be the Dallas Cowboys' premier left tackle, Tyron Smith. And let me tell you, if there's one team that I would really like to see him go to, and I would not be too shocked to see sign him, that's going to be the Los Angeles Rams. Now, here's the deal. When you look at the history of the Los Angeles Rams, you go back to their previous run for a Super Bowl just a few years ago, they were in this similar situation where they could have used a premier left tackle, a guy to protect the blind side of Matthew Stafford, and they went and got a guy named Andrew Whitworth. Here we are, a few years later, this team, the window for winning a Super Bowl is actually a little bit more open than I think anyone could have anticipated just last season, but with $43 million in cap space, and Spotrac having Smith listed for an AAV for his next deal along the lines of about $7.5 million, I probably would expect it to hit at least $10 million, maybe 11 or 12, because Tyron Smith has been as consistent as they come. He's a 2-time All-Pro, 8-time Pro Bowler. It's not like he's some slouch. I think he could make a little bit more money than $7.5 million per year wherever he goes. But I do look at it as a real opportunity to get the blindside protection for Matthew Stafford upgraded here. And this is one of those moves that just kind of feels like a Rams type of move. Now, you have Alaric Jackson. He's set to be a restricted free agent. He was solid. PFF has him credited for only 1 sack this past season. I believe he only had 3 penalties as well. So, I mean, solid effort. But when you have a guy like Tyron Smith coming in at the age that he's at in a weird transition year, leaving his, the team that he was drafted by, I do think that with the money that they have available, he's the type of guy you bring in. And then Alaric Jackson ends up being the guy that can come in for relief, because Smith does have an injury history, but when he is starting, he is one of the best left tackles in the NFL when he's healthy and actually playing, especially when it comes to pass blocking. Run blocking, that's a different conversation, but when it comes to protecting the blind side of a quarterback, he is among the best in the NFL. So the way I see it, you have Sean McVay leading the way still. You have Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and you have a couple of really young guys emerging skill talent-wise in both Kyron Williams and, of course, Puka Nacua, who took the league by storm last season. Rams O-line was already really good last year. Smith presents an even bigger upgrade for a unit that surprised last season as well. I think that is something that's worth mentioning here. I don't think anyone expected the Rams offensive line to be as good as it was just this past season. You solidify it with a guy like Tyron Smith, 2-time All-Pro on the left side there of the O-line, and this move just feels really logical. The other idea that is kind of backing this point is that I would have to believe that not only does Smith want to make money, but on top of that, he probably wants to go somewhere where he feels like he can contend. LA, big market, money deals, all that kind of stuff. But on top of that, the Rams are in prime position right now to fight for playoff spots, at least for the next couple of seasons, the way things are looking. There's going to have to be some retooling as far as the secondary is concerned over there in LA, but overall, this is a very well-rounded team that surprised a lot of people last year, making their playoff push, and I think with a couple extra pieces, Smith being included in that, I would not be shocked to see this team make another playoff push and potentially go even further into the playoffs this next season here. But those are the 6 guys I wanted to highlight here. Match them up with the team. Again, I invite you in the comment section down below. Do the very same. Who do you see out in free agency, and where do you see them or expect to see them go? Or maybe just where you would like to see them go. Give me a reason why. Break it down the way I am here. I would love to discuss with you on the comment section down below. But that is it for me as always. If you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.